I'm walking in Penwood today, which is fast becoming another firm favourite of mine. I was introduced to it, well, I've known it for a while actually, but reintroduced to it by my good friend Giles Penfound. We recorded an episode out here quite recently together, doing 5/4 photography, but today on the other side of the road, as it were, so you might well hear some traffic in a while, which is a bit of a shame, but it's full of bird life here. But it does run quite close to the A34, which is a pretty major arterial route in England land that goes from Newbury, roughly in the middle of the country, I suppose. Not the middle as in up and down, but east to west, as you travel between London and Cardiff, Wales. So it sort of heads down, if you like, towards Southampton, that sort of direction. So it's pretty busy most of the time. I'm photographing today, though, on the walk for my sketchbook photographs with my iPhone, and that does mean that it's a bit tricky because I use the iPhone as my recorder as well. Believe it or not, for those that have forgotten or don't know how this show is recorded, the outdoor bits anyway, I use the iPhone with a dead cat on it and a recording app called Alon. So I have to chop and change between the two to make my sketchbook photographs. But I wanted to record, or rather photograph with the iPhone today, just because I haven't for a while during the show, and I thought, well, why not? Sometimes it's the only camera you have on you, and it's one of those days with lots of dappled light. And I do use my iPhone when I'm walking in woodland, as Mark Cohen never sang, to sometimes photograph pools of light that I find. And today's a perfect day for that. So here is one straight away here, just into the woodland, just off the path. Here we go. A sketchbook photograph from the iPhone to start the day. Before we start the show, a human message. I think you'll get the idea. Thanks to Art Helper for supporting this show and keeping us here. And I say that as a human, which apparently now needs saying even more. Art Helper, you see, is a professional networking community for human artists with a real-time feed of work and discussion and news and a global directory of human-made art. Made by humans for humans, featuring humans. I think you get the idea. It's free to join at arthelper.com/sign up. arthelper.com/sign up.
Today on the Photo Walk.
I enjoy photographing real people because I think the encounters, I call them encounters, could be good, bad. You just never know what you're going to get. With celebrities and musicians, you kind of have to break through that brick wall. Because, they come in, I've got another photo shoot, it's not that big a deal. But all of a sudden, if you can get past that veneer and talk to somebody about something other than their acting or their music and start to talk about, like Billingsgate. I mean, that was a great conversation I had with Roger Daltrey. And he goes, oh my gosh, I love that market. And that took his demeanor from being somewhat guarded to, wow, this is great.
That's Paul Mobley. And today the conversation is portrait-based. On my most recent trips to cities in India and Bangladesh, and spoiler alert, I'm sure I will mention that within my chat with my guest today. You're not going to talk about India or Bangladesh, are you, Neil? Well, possibly, yes. I worked with just two focal lengths, 35mm and 85mm. Whether it was candid or formal, they were the two focal lengths that I worked with. That's in full frame terms. I use Fujifilm, so it's a 23 and 56. And I noticed just how much fun I'd been having making portraits. I made far more than I thought I would make. And the portraits, most of them, that I've made, that I've kept anyway, I'm really, really happy with, and they form some of my favourite photographs and the experience of photographing in those places. And I think it is a privilege, isn't it, when you make a portrait, when somebody lets you point a camera at them. It really lets you, and this I think is the magic of connection. I think something passes between you, a kind of, an act of trust. And without sounding all woo-woo, though I dare say I'm going to, I think you feel the weight of it, with a small w, immediately, that connection that you're making. So often when I make portraits for my day-to-day social photography business, you often hear words or comments like, I hate my photo being taken. Not always necessarily with that accent. I don't like, don't point that thing at me. Ooh, I hate being photographed. Like they're having their teeth pulled. And it doesn't take a grade A student of ladybird philosophy to decipher what's really being said here, along the lines of, I don't like the way I look, obviously, or varying versions of. Not always, granted, but often. So I normally retort with, don't worry about that, or I try and steer them in the direction of, this is a picture about a moment of history, or in history. Because I don't think the best portraits are about what somebody looks like. Yes, it can help, of course it can. Where's Pups gone? Pups! Come on. They're often about the 2 or 3 seconds either side, when your subject forgets the camera's there. Well, not entirely forgets, because of course you are there. Oh, look, some bluebells in a pool of light, not quite the right kind of light. Eyes open. I'm sure that'll happen again in this woodland anyway. But yes, it's the 2 or 3 seconds before or after the moment you thought you were waiting for. That's when the magic happens. Not the composed smile necessarily, not the held breath. Anyway, my guest, Paul Mobley, is an expert in that. He is an American portrait photographer who spent a bit of time training, actually, with Annie Leibovitz in New York. He built a career shooting celebrities and major advertising clients, and then spent years driving across the United States to make deeply personal books about, and I'm careful about using this word, but you'll understand where I'm going with it, ordinary Americans, farmers and firefighters. I know there's nothing ordinary about these sorts of people. Centenarians, everyday heroes. And stand by, I'm going to sound all woo-woo again, finding the souls in faces that many photographers might walk past. I hope you'll enjoy our chat because he says, I think, some very important things about making portraits, taking photographs of people today. Also, in the mailbag, as we walk between the chat with Paul, you're about to be introduced today by Phil Ferris to an Australian poet of life who is now the gem of my life. Or perhaps he was the missing gem I didn't realise I needed. But now I've found him, thanks to Phil. I want to share him with you. Wallace Shackleton shares his memory of the Camino by bike. I didn't realise that was a way you could do it, but of course you can. Then a slight warning for reasons that will become clearer. Richard Rawlings' story or letter is most probably going to make you itch. When I read it, popped it on the running order to read today, I was itching, itching my ears and head, just saying. And we check in with Raja Bhagavatula, who's found his own magical place on Earth. So plenty in the show today. Shall we walk? In my desire to make endless photo projects, that's the Lotto life, that one. Lotto win? Oh yeah, get the projects book out, I'd make my way through it. I'd like to do a project called On the Other Side of the Fence, because look, there's a fence, and the other side, oh, that woodland looks amazing. But I can't get in there, I'm only allowed in this bit. I can see a real carpet of bluebells through there. Whew. But this side of the fence isn't bad either. You know what keeps this whole thing going? It's what you notice, the stuff that catches your eyes or eye on a walk, or the thing that you nearly photographed but you didn't, that you write in about, or just the way that your mind works when you're out somewhere with a camera, or even without one as you're just about to find out. That's what this show's all about. It's made by your letters. If you are getting out, wandering and actually looking at the world rather than just passing through it, this show is for you. And I love to hear from you. So send your thoughts, your pictures, your letters, your musings, your suggestions of things we should see to stories@photowalk.show. Stories@photowalk.show. If you're sending in pictures 2,500 pixels wide, please, minimums, as they say. It looks like today's mailbag. Well, it feels like, it sounds like, it reads like, it may well have a theme. That theme being my conversation with Ruth Guest last week on the show, because I got a reasonable amount of mail and feedback on that conversation. Ruth is a photographer and cyber psychologist who talked at quite some length about social media and how we interact with it. And this world where we have or take or make lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of photographs, but rarely archive them. That's why the show was called A Society of the Endless Image. Anyway, I should have said, or rather thanked somebody for the introduction to Ruth, and I didn't at the time. So I will be sure to go home and flagellate myself with a damp copy of Lens Weekly. But I should have thanked our good friend Phil Ferris, or as we know him, Phil the Ferris Filter. But I am renaming you Phil. I'm going to call you Phil the Ferris Wheel of Inspiration, or something very similar, because that's what your letters, that's what your thoughts often do. I've given you entirely the wrong, you own, or rather earn your show moniker when you write in enough. Well, Phil, you've had the wrong show name for a long time, so I'm changing it from today. So I'm going to doff my cap to you, because he was the one who brought Ruth to my attention, and I had that wonderful conversation with Ruth last week, and I'm all the richer, and hopefully you feel you are, for having done so. I did, though, thank him after the event, and I asked the question on my email, how are you? As we so often do. And usually a cursory, I'm okay, thanks, comes back. And sometimes people say a bit more. And I received one of his humbling, thought-provoking, is it riposts, along with another introduction to someone I shall leave links for on today's show page, although at the start I thought Phil was maybe having a bad day. Brief answer to my how are you, says Phil, I am well, but I'm taking steps to be better. Like a number of unfathomable things, the speed of light, the location of a speeding particle, well, is a relative term. Compared to many of my school friends, I'm here and breathing. Oh no, I'll reread that because there was a bit in brackets and it's important. Compared to too many of my school friends, I am here and breathing. Compared to how I was 10 years ago, things could be a bit better. Then again, that could be said of my job in the NHS. Things were so much better then, he says through his custom nostalgia spectacles. I am now of an age, a few years ahead of yourself, he says. There's a lot of bracket usage here, where things don't always work quite as I would expect. Phil, I think sometimes I could apply myself to that as well. I've been battling a post-long COVID fatigue that's been feeding off the increasing stress of my job. I'm sorry to hear that, Phil. I think we need another one of our walks, methinks. You, me and your Field Marshal Cathy. And a bacon butty. Not necessarily in that order. One positive that I'm focusing on, says Phil, is that it's forced me to consider my quality of life. Now, Cathy has fully retired and is enjoying her freedom immensely while working out a new routine. I have looked at those friends who have passed on and thought about the fact that there's no guarantee to the time we have. Do you see those AI Instagram posts, Phil says, where they show actors in characters from where they made a film or show and how they look now. Yes, I have actually. It's called Forever Young, isn't it, that channel? There's a song that sings Forever Young over and over. It's very, very clever. You see famous people generally morph, don't you? From one character, one film that they were in to another, to another, to another, to another. The passage of time in about 30 seconds. Anyway, Phil writes, I enjoyed the first few reels of this, then I began noticing how many of those once famous had passed at my age or earlier. Phil, the realisation of how soon some of them checked out makes me appreciate what I do have, even on the crappy, scrappy work days. Another, if somewhat morbid, in brackets, positive. But on the subject of positive, here we go, Phil. You're picking this up for me now. It's one of our Ferris wheel journeys. See, that could have been another name. I can't speak too highly of the philosophical, sometimes surreal musings of Darby Hudson, an Australian poet. Darby is on YouTube and Instagram with his bon mots. Bon mot. You don't pronounce the S, do you? Or the T. Bon mot. As well as having them in a couple of books. My French is terrible, but essentially that's witticisms, good words. Bon mot. I think so. I've so much in so many ways, says Phil. In the lottery of life, I was born into the West, to a relatively affluent family. In this world, there'll be people so much more capable than I who were born into situations that restrict their growth or ability to thrive. It's all relative, Phil, sometimes, isn't it? But you are right. So I practice gratitude. I have the luxury of time and resources that my ancestors would be amazed at. I've got leisure time to journal and indulge in hobbies like photography. But I do need to meditate more. Ruth Guest is a good example to aspire to for that. Yes, she is. We didn't really talk too much about that, did we? We should have done. I need to exercise more. Oof. You and me both. Greatly reduce my sugar intake. Oh, you and me both. We have a cupboard at home, Phil. I call it the cupboard of doom. And it gets refilled too much. I know, it's the cupboard of doom, isn't it, pups? It is. What should I do with the cupboard of doom? Throw it away. But we didn't have a cupboard, or it's actually a drawer. But cupboard just sounds, I don't know, sounds more comedic. The cupboard of doom. And in it is, it seems to be an endless feed of Kit Kats and any other sugary tosh you could name. Not that there's anything wrong with Kit Kats, he says, very quickly rescuing himself. Finally, a reduction in gas would definitely be a plus. I have no idea which kind you mean. I'm assuming you mean gear-acquired syndrome. That would be a plus. Have you seen the new Insta360 Lunar video camera? Wow, and I don't even make videos. Point made, Phil, point made. Thank you for the email prompt, he says. It stirred something of the writer in me. I feel so much better now. A pleasure, Phil. Good to be your listener. I shall send you a bill. But I'll tell you what, it's getting heavier by the week dragging this couch around behind me. Hey, usually I'm using it to hide behind when somebody fires a compliment into the show, but today you're sat lounging on it in share mode. But you've done it again, though, Phil. This is why I'm having to elevate your name to inspiration status. You've introduced me, ergo us, to another amazing creative, Darby Hudson. So I thought I'd play some of his musings that he releases through his YouTube channel. And, well, first up, some background, though. Darby Hudson is a writer and artist hailing from Melbourne in Australia, known for his typewriter poetry, spoken word videos, and a darkly comic, aphoristic style that's gathered millions of views on social media. His actual YouTube channel doesn't appear to necessarily show those millions of views, but other social media, yes, you can see it. He spent years sitting by a train station in Melbourne writing on an old typewriter, a gift from an ex. Sometimes he was tucked into the bushes I know not why. His books include Derby Love and You're Gonna Be Okay. And he was also poet in residence on the set of Adam Elliott's animated film Memoir of a Snail, which is a really interesting job, if ever you were to receive one. But I thought I'd play you some of his words. He speaks quite quickly, but keep up. This is one of his YouTube shorts. Quite quick fire, as I say, but in a few seconds, it's the story of his life writing poetry by the train tracks.
At 35, I turned down my first and last promotion at work so I'd have the energy to write poetry for free to zero audience by the train tracks at night for 10 years after work. And during those 10 years, I read long dead writers who made me feel less alone in a world where everything's ridiculous and everyone was serious. And that's where I learnt what I'd always felt, that the heart was ancient, hadn't had any updates, and that endlessly fixing things is a form of existing, not living. You could just give up and nothing would collapse, and you'd still be alive. Most people had already given up in a way that had stolen something from them, but you could give up in a way that charged you with spirit. And by those tracks, I recharged my life with magic after the world had tried to explain it away. There was another doorway into this life. It was never talked about, but I think people secretly knew. And over those 10 years, I wrote this book, You're Gonna Be Okay, because no matter what. It offers exactly zero advice, just a bit of sideways courage I wasn't hearing anywhere else.
I just wanted to add in, come on pups, this way. I just wanted to add in that Darby Hudson's book, Derby Love. No, we're not having any now. I'm taking some pictures. I'm talking about Derby Love. Is full of wonderful witticisms and truisms that his mum shared with him before she passed on, and you can completely understand through these thoughts that he collated from his mum, where he received his inspiration as a poet and a thinker, I think anyway. I don't know that much about him. Perhaps if I read more, he'd say, no, it's something else. But it feels to me like that may have been his mother's gift. So you get phrases like this in the book. Derby Love, let's go open my overdue bill on the beach while watching an incredible sunset and see which emotion wins. Derby Love, I can't talk right now. I'm late for an appointment. I've always lived in my own time zone. How many of us do that? Derby Love, all the hate is sold to you, but all the love is free. Oh, that could have been a PS today. It's, I tell you what though, it's a book that's definitely making its way to my bookshelf. There is a particular part of that shelf for words of inspiration in smaller books. Anyway, just ahead of the first part of my chat with Paul Mobley today, more feedback about last week's guest, Ruth Guest, and we talked about walking the Camino briefly, atop the bits about social media and how photography spiritually enriches us. So just to fill the gaps, some dot to dots here. The Camino de Santiago is a network of ancient pilgrimage routes across Europe that converge on the cathedral city of Santiago de Compostela in northwest Spain. All sorts of people walk it. You get religious pilgrims, solo travellers looking for headspace. That's a pilgrimage in itself. People recovering from illness or grief. Seasoned hikers and photographers, of course, which is one of the reasons I really want to do this walk or pilgrimage and have not done it yet. So there was some feedback to that part of the show when we talked about the Camino, walking it, from Wallace Shackleton. Awakening, he says, for the photo walk, coming through my headphones at 5 o'clock in the morning. I fell back to sleep at 3-ish this morning, to you talking about the Camino de Santiago. I'm not quite sure I like being thought of as a sleep aid, Wallace. I did the French route of the Camino by bicycle, he says, with some friends from my wife's parish, and was considering doing it when I retired. Then, second mention today, this is a word we usually shy from. Then came that word that starts with C and ends with D, and my hip went. Long walks got a bit painful. But I'll never forget the high when we saw Santiago on the final day, the spontaneous dance that some pilgrims break into, and to be honest, a bit of a sense of anticlimax when entering Santiago with the realization that it's almost over. You don't have to be religious to do a pilgrimage. The experiences along the way are character building. Don't procrastinate, Neil. Life's too short. Wallace. God, those first two letters today. I'm quickly looking along my list and thinking, right, let's get to it. We'll go over the fence for a start. I feel, Wallace, like I've just been Derby loved, as it were. Right, shall we hear from Paul Mobley? I told you about him already at the head of the show, of course, so I shall just press play, and you and I can walk a little while he shares stories of his life behind a camera, making portraits of the most wonderful people, famous or not. Paul, photography's gain is piano playing's loss, I suppose, because I hear that's what you might have chosen. If you hadn't put a camera to your eye, you would have been a world-famous pianist.
You never know. I started playing the piano when I was 5 years old. My mother made all three kids start on my grandmother's piano, and I was kind of the only one that made it over the hill, as they say. When you're learning an instrument, you have to struggle and struggle until you get over the hill, and it's really been one of the great joys of my life to be able to sit down and express myself in that way.
Do you know, that's a very similar story to my grandmother had a piano. It was an old French piano from 1878 made by, I still remember the signature inside the lid. Borg was the name, not the tennis player, but the piano maker. Grandmas and parents have a lot to do with how we choose what we choose in life. And was a similar story for you with photography?
Yeah, it was one of those things where I was in high school and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I wasn't really an athlete, so all of the athletes I didn't get along with them because I wasn't in that group. I wasn't especially smart either, so the brainiacs, as we call them, they didn't pay attention to me. I was kind of the odd guy in the middle, and I had seen an ad for the local newspaper or the high school newspaper looking for a photographer. And I thought, why not? And that's really how it started.
But did you take the recognized assisting route initially? Was that, I know the assisting route these days is harder to get on for many photographers. Was that available to you?
Not in high school. I had never done any photography training whatsoever. That really all started, Neil, after I went to high school, then I went to art school, college for photography. Then I moved to New York and started that whole assisting thing, which was a very big part of my life back then.
Who did you assist?
Well, the biggest one was Annie Leibovitz, but I worked a lot with David Langley. I worked with quite a few guys freelance. And that was really my idea, was to try, you had two routes when you were in New York assisting. You could either take a full-time job, which was steady income, but you'd be working with the same person, or a lot of guys chose to work freelance for as many photographers as they could to get a much broader education and see how that one was lighting and what that one was doing. And so for me, I kind of did a mix of both. I assisted a lot of people, then I took a short full-time job with Annie, and all of it worked out great for me because I was able to see really as much as I felt like I needed to and learn.
Do you remember that day where you took that leap of faith, where you thought, right, Paul, this is it. I'm on my own. I'm no longer assisting. This is me. I'm now Paul, the professional.
I remember it like yesterday. It was the most frightening day of my life because, I had taken a couple of years and was assisting and had at least a regular paycheck coming in. And in New York, that meant everything was to just pay the rent. Then all of a sudden I realized I can't do this forever. And very similar to when I had gotten to New York with no friends and no assisting jobs, that fear was pretty much the same when I left. I said, I'm going on my own now. Again, wasn't assisting, so now I was back to no income, no credibility, starting literally all over again.
This may be too early in the conversation, actually, but I was watching a video on YouTube made by Kirsten Lutz for the podcast Camera Shake. And in it, right near the start of the video I was watching anyway, was that you were talking about learning to love the word no effectively. That's what it is in my language. Or as you said on the show, send your work over and over and over and over to people. And the more you get, the more you get. That learning to embrace the word no is so important in developing a career in photography, isn't it?
It is such a big part because there's a lot of people trying to do the same thing, and many of them are extremely talented as well. If you go in and have a hard time with rejection, it's going to eat you alive. I got so used to no and being told, we'll get back to you, or your work is nice, but we're not looking for anybody. I've heard every excuse, Neil, under the sun. And I just got to a point where it was always no. But I thought, you know what? I really don't have anything else to fall back on. I don't want to go work for my father or change careers. You know, the idea of being a photographer was so intriguing. And I had seen what success kind of looked like when I was in New York, working with guys that were busy. So I could see what it could be if I make it. And I just stuck with it. So I think when you taste that level of success or even see it as a third or fourth assistant, it's hard to not want to do it yourself.
Do you this might be something strange to me, I don't know, but have you kept those letters of rejection? Have you kept the I have my no file. I've kept every single letter of rejection I've ever had from my broadcasting career anyway.
In my mind, for sure. I didn't, I have pages I have hundreds of emails saying no. I got 4 last week. But most of the ones that really hit home are still up in my memory bank. You never forget them. I've gotten to a point in my life and career now that I really believe everything happens for a reason.
See, that's interesting because I look at your portfolio and I wonder who's saying no to you now, because your portfolio reads like an A to Z of who's who. So there's this, well, surely nobody's saying no to Paul now. It's Paul's on the phone. Okay, put him through. Let's have a chat.
Well, it happens more often, but you'd be surprised, and a lot of it now, I think in the early days, Neil, I used to take a lot of it personally. And now that I've understood the business, especially when it comes to the celebs, whether they're musicians or, they're busy and everybody wants to work with them and they only have so much time to delegate. They all have personal lives and different things. So for me now, when I get a no or a rejection, as I call it, in many cases, it wasn't me as a person or my reputation or, as you said, my portfolio. It was just a time thing. Sometimes it's still hard to hear no, but I understand it a little bit better.
I would imagine you also have to go through the dreaded gatekeepers. That could be an examination question all of its own, really. The gatekeepers. Discuss.
It is exactly. It's the number one issue I have today, because I have said time and time again, when I finally get to the talent, whether it's Ringo or Roger Daltrey or Mike Tyson or whoever it is, they're always so nice, Neil. All those people, people ask me, who's the most difficult person, or was anybody mean to you? I don't think I can count 5. I'm generally a nice person and I'm respectful of the other person's time, but I'm still surprised I'm, getting past all the guards and gatekeepers and that most of the subjects are so very nice and so very accommodating and, will say something to me like, oh, I really wanted to do this because I love your work. And I'm like, oh, you saw my work? Because a lot of them don't even get a chance to see my work. They are just told by their manager or publicist to do this photo shoot with this guy because he's good or he's whatever it might be.
You work with celebrities and with people that most of us will never meet in our lifetime. But you also work with people who are, if you like, in inverted commas, very much the normal folk of this world. People like me, I suppose. And I'm fascinated if you approach those two worlds in any different sense when the camera comes up to your eye.
I do. I'm glad you brought that up because I am as intrigued with everyday folks as famous people. Was hoping I could tell you my story about going to Billingsgate, which was funny because I have a very dear friend who lives in London and he's an art director. He was with Leo Burnett for a long, long time. And one day I think I had told him I wanted to take my camera and go to the fish market and just ask some of these characters to photograph them. And he looked at me and he said, Paul, it's a madhouse there. Are you sure you want to go and take that on? And so I took an assistant. And as soon as I got in there, I thought, oh my gosh. And it wasn't the chaos of the people. It was how busy the vendors were. I went up to a couple of guys that were all, had fish all over them and were filthy with their aprons, and went up to one and, said to the guy, hey, do you mind if I take your picture? And he kind of looked at me and he said, mate, are you crazy? Look how busy I am. And so I got probably 10 rejections at Billingsgate. And it broke my heart because every face was better than the one before. And finally, I think the boss guy at the end, I went up to him and I said, would you mind if I just did a quick portrait of you? And he said, sure, but make it fast. So there was kind of a rusty refrigerator, Neil, to the right of him, which was a perfect backdrop. And I put him there and we did it. And all of a sudden, all the other guys saw the boss man getting his picture taken. And they all came over and said, well, why don't you photograph me, mate? And so next thing you know, I had like 10 guys step over. And it was just like a domino effect. But my friend said, how did you pull that off? And I said, I just, tried to be as charming as I could. But the interesting thing, back to your question, was that looking through the camera at somebody like that, they're not really used to having their picture taken or their portrait made. So they might give you a really great expression, whereas somebody famous always has their perfect look. Don't turn their head this way because they do it all the time. But I enjoy photographing real people because I think the encounters, I call them encounters, could be good, bad. You just never know what you're going to get. With celebrities and musicians, you kind of have to break through that brick wall because, they come in, oh, I got another photo shoot. It's not that big a deal. But all of a sudden, if you can get past that veneer and talk to somebody about something other than their acting or their music and start to talk about, like, Billingsgate. I mean, that was a great conversation I had with Roger Daltrey. And he goes, oh my gosh, I love that market. And that took his demeanor from being somewhat guarded to, wow, this is great. And I could see it in the images. You could just see the transformation as the shoot kept going.
Actually, that supports very well what you say when you're communicating with your sitters, because I think one of your pieces of advice is don't talk to them about their career. They've said that a million times, and they're not doing an interview with you. Or most of the time, they're not necessarily doing a magazine interview with you. They're there to have their photograph made. So if you can find something else to discuss, that can open the world for you.
I never, ever bring up, oh, I love your band. I love that song. Oh, you're my favorite musician. Oh, I love that role you did in the movie. Never. They've heard it a million times. To me, I might try to come across it as, I understand you collect fly fishing rods. I understand you collect antique cars. Oh, and that totally shifts it, because in many cases they'd rather talk about that than what they do every day, right?
When I was, I say, loosely taught how to interview, or at least talked or walked through the basics in my broadcasting induction, I remember a tutor saying the most important part of an interview is how your interviewee walks into the studio. Never mind what you've got written as research on a piece of paper and so on and so forth. It's that very moment of interaction that sets the scene for the entire interview. And I think that's probably true of how you work within a studio as well, isn't it?
Oh, I think they're very similar, right? Because if you're doing an interview, Neil, and you happen to know that your interviewee happens to like Perrier water with a slice of lemon, and you've got one there ready, you're ahead of the game. That's just doing a little bit of research. But I think it's the same. I think it's the same thing. I've had many, many times when someone will show up to the studio or on set, and I can just tell they're distracted. They either got off the phone with something that wasn't working, who knows? But I think the biggest challenge, it's funny, the camera itself doesn't come up to my eye until I've got past all of that getting through to my subject, because you can't just bring a camera up, hey, how you doing, and start, put the camera in their face. That's the worst thing you can do, I think. You've got to, I think, get everything, got to start the communication for sure, and hope that you can get them focused on, what they're doing. And that it always shows in the eyes, right? I mean, that old saying, it's always in the eyes. For me, when you look at the pictures, if there's a connection between the viewer and my picture, and they stop and look at it, I think we did good. You're not just flipping. Oh, that's it stopped you in your tracks almost.
What kind of people are harder then to photograph or to perhaps center or bring back into the room when they're giving you that vibe of, I've done this a million times before, Paul. Could you just take the pictures and I want to go in about 2 minutes? How do you recenter them, refocus them?
That's the hardest thing. Is I always do some research. I always get a sense of a little bit about my subject more than what the world knows, and a lot of times, if that's not working, then I will almost give it up to the gods and say, listen, I have to make a beautiful portrait of you. I appreciate you being here. If you would give me just 5 minutes of, complete attention on what I'm doing. And I think if you just if everything else isn't working and you just are kind and you ask and say, I've got to make a wonderful portrait of you, and I'm only going to do a few things here, but stay with me. Sometimes just common courtesy goes a long way with people.
The word photogenic is one that really interests me. I was doing a shoot yesterday, and somebody said, not very photogenic, so it's probably a waste of time with me. And I tried to get this idea across, and I've failed, to be honest, Paul. I've tried this so many times. I've got to find the right words for it. Because I don't think that being photogenic is necessarily skin deep. I think it's more to do with personality. It's more to do with character. I don't think it's more to do necessarily with a cliche of how many wrinkles you've got, that you've got a lived-in face. I think being photogenic is more about the person than it is about the picture, if that makes sense.
Agreed 100%. A lot of times what you're seeing on the face is what they're feeling inside. If you photograph somebody who's very troubled, you're going to see it on their face. And sometimes that makes for an amazing portrait. A lot of times I will just look to see what's in front of me. Sometimes before I've even started, camera's ready to go, and I might be talking, and my subject might just kind of put their hand on their head and go, oh gosh, I'll tell you, what a day. And I'll snap that. They don't even know I snapped it, but I did it because it was a captured moment in time, right? So I agree with you. It's everything starts on the inside, and the face is just what they may be feeling. And whether you decide you want to change it or go with it, that's really your job as the artist.
Actually, on that note, and you're perfectly poised and placed to answer this, 3 decades as a photographer photographing the sort of people you have, how much has social media run a wrecking ball in some ways through how people are when they enter your studio? The decision they make and how they're going to come across in their shoot. Has social media changed that?
Well, I don't know what it has done for them, the subjects. For me, I always use social media as one thing to promote my work. I know that nobody cares where I went for fish and chips today. I've always used social media as just to show my work. I've never been hired on a big job off of social media. People will say, it's all, parts of a puzzle in building a career. It's great to have a social media presence. I think it will kind of signify, or it solidifies what you've done, and people can look at it. Everyone's so fast. If they're looking at it, it's for 5 seconds. But as far as the subjects that walk into the studio, I find, again, the more famous, the less they do. They have people doing it for them, or they just don't do that much. So I'm not really sure how they feel coming into, because I think they know if they come in to my studio, it's going to be a serious portrait. It's going to be something that we all hope is going to be memorable. One of the things I say a lot to my subjects is, I know you've been photographed a lot, but my hope is that I can make a picture that you will remember, that you'll look back on 10 years and say, yeah, that Paul guy did that. That was a great photograph. That is the best compliment that I could get. Or I remember that picture you took of so-and-so. It was a great image.
And Paul Mobley is back on the show very soon. I'm making pictures. My sketchbook photographs today are of pools of light. Now, that's not a new trick for me. I know. It's not a new trick at all, is it? But I wanted today to use my iPhone. Just for a difference, really. Vive la différence, as my favourite phrase goes, from France. And so I found here, just in here, there's a lovely pool of light here. As I might have to open up a bit here. I was getting very close and tight in, but I'm going to make this a slightly... Let's see if we can get more of the tree in. I can see the shaft of light coming through, which is really nice. So let's get this then. There we go. I'll put that on the show page today. I will do, pups. I will. Actually, Paul is back on the Extra Mile today, where he'll be sharing a story just briefly about the world's toughest sport, which may raise a smile for some of us who played this at school in the UK anyway. So that's on the Extra Mile. If you'd like to hear the Extra Mile, then go to the website, photowalk.show. Sorry, I was just watching where Pup's running off to. And then click the Extra Mile tab. Now, there are two things happening in June for the show. At the end of the month, there is a get-together. We did one for the 500th show. This year, we're going on another, but this time there is a photographic project. Really, last time we wandered. It was a wonderful wander. We walked at Greenham Common for about half a day, but this time we're spending longer together. And there's a Barbie. Put another thingy on the Barbie. There's a barbecue in the evening, and you can also camp and stay if you want. All the details are on the website. But we're going to a wonderful steam rally in southern England. Eclectic. It's a steam rally that also, last time I went anyway, featured an American Wild West area. So, yeah, make of that as you will. So lots of people to photograph, lots of stories to tell. It's not an official workshop as such, but I dare say we may go into that a little bit. Mally's coming. Yeah, my friend Mally. He's coming along. Actually, he sent in, I'm not sure whether I'll have received it yet, but he said he'd send in one of his iPhone pictures from a bluebell walk that he's doing. So that may feature on this show page today. So go to the website. June Meetup is the tab that you want. And also, the start of June sees us in Scotland. So just over a month to go until that. And you may be thinking, hang about, I've got a week free, I have. I'd love to go and walk with the Photo Walk team, explore the Highlands, and print in a photogravure studio, because we're doing a print workshop within that week, where you get to enjoy the physical press, and it is a physical press of photogravure, make something absolutely beautiful. But we always start the week in a part of the Highlands called the Blackwater, which is... I think if I had to have a list of happy places, that, along with Loch Marie, would definitely feature, with its woodlands and its wonderful historic bridge and the rapids. And I thought you might like to hear some of the recordings that we've made on previous visits, because it's a fantastic, would you call it a fantastic place to just sort of bed yourself into photographing in one of the most just incredibly photogenic places on Earth. I've found the lesser spotted Keith standing in the mud. You are, Keith, the only person across 2 weeks who's actually got their legs out. Do you spend most of your hardy northerner of England land, aren't you, really?
Oh, definitely,
hey?
yes.
So you're when do your legs go away, ever?
Snow and harsh wind and rain, but most of the time they're out.
What are you photographing anyway?
The reflections down there, I like my water reflections.
Yeah.
So you can see there, getting the trees back there, and then actually just turning this way and looking back, a bit of a micro scene going up the side of the rocks and up the side there.
Yeah.
So the old, yes, we've got the nice river flowing there, but look behind you.
And we're here again on just another wonderful day on the Blackwater.
The sun always shines here. I think there's a microclimate.
Yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous location, and I've been rather hooked on the rock features a bit further up in the rapids. But we're now walking through the most gorgeous pine forest.
Smell, breathe in, smell in rather, breathe in, sniff in, whatever can you smell it?
Oh, yeah.
So if you'd like to join me in Scotland in just over a month to enjoy a workshop, a retreat and good home-cooked food, and every evening we'll talk about photography. Giles is coming with me as well, so we'll have lots of conversations about photography, that thing that we love. Then go to the website and click on Scotland 26. That's the tab on photowalk.show, Scotland 26. Do you want me to throw that stick for you, pups? Is that why you're lying there? It's getting quite hot, actually. Come on. This is stick of the day. You ready? You ready? You ready? Go on then. Oh, it's broken in half. Not the best stick of the day. You're bringing back the bigger half. I would as well. Come on, this way. So now you can hear the traffic. Yeah, I know, it's not the nicest, is it, pups? I love this bit. I would walk down here and record. If there was no traffic, it's lovely. It's a really nice part of the woodland here, but it's right next to this road. We're going to walk this way, pups. The A34 road. That's now a bypass of around Newbury. Quite a famous bypass, actually. There was an eco-warrior. Was he an eco-warrior? Come this way. I'm sure I'm right with that. Called Swampy. Was it Swamp? I think it was Swampy. That was part of those that were protesting against the A34 bypass. I might have my eco-warrior protests the wrong way round. I think Swampy now is he's a bit of a 2.5 man in terms of family and probably an escort estate or something, taking the kids to school. This way. Last week's show then drew a fair few comments into the mailbag about my chat with Ruth Guest, the photographer and the cyber psychologist. I did say there were a few in today's show in the mailbag. And this next piece of feedback is from Richard Rawlings, and he'll have a picture on the show page today. Do make sure you go to the show page. Every single week, it takes a while to do, you know. We have a show page with pictures from our guests and those who write letters in. There's loads of links on there, some films, some videos to watch. Hi Neil, says Richard. Just out for my walk along the river, pondering such things as why the gnats swarm over the paths and not to one side, and if they taste like chicken. I got round to thinking about the last episode with Ruth Guest while I was doing this. just before you make your comments. Riccardo, he says, giving you a Latin name for no reason. I have had exactly the same thought about gnats, although I can't say I've ever thought they might taste like chicken. Because any time I've consumed one quite by accident, all I've ended up doing is having a coughing fit. But yes, as the summer starts to strike the path that I walk, particularly by the Kennet and Avon Canal, I too wonder why the gnats seem to be over the path and not over the river. Why always the path? Surely they'd enjoy being above the water. So why don't they swarm above the water? So I went and did some research, Richard. That's where all this is leading. The swarming thing is all about mating. It's the male gnats with a silent G hovering in a group to make it easier for females to find them, and they tend to congregate around things that contrast visually with the landscape. It's like they have contrast detection, like what our cameras have. So a path through vegetation is a good example, because that's a landmark and they can use it as a sort of a meeting spot. So Richard, they're not tormenting us, on purpose anyway. And every cloud of gnats that we've ever walked through, this is a nice way to think about it. This is why I said, and I'm scratching now. I am actually scratching. Every cloud of gnats is essentially a very small, very irritating singles night. And I'm still itching. Anyway, back to your letter, Richard, who's obviously been thinking about one of the main points of our conversation, which wasn't about gnats, it was about social media and AI. He says, interesting comments were made on the show. It does take some effort not to follow the crowd on Instagram. I know for a fact that if I put a dazzling sunset on there, I'm going to get likes. Whereas other images just bomb. But, and it is a big but, I don't really care. If you like my work, then fine. If you don't, well, that's also fine. I'm not after the validation like an influencer who's only trying to get noticed. It's not true they have nothing to offer me, the likes that is. But I've weathered so many algorithm changes in the last 10 years, I'm not sure I could be bothered about it or with it anymore. AI, because we discussed AI, is a different matter because I do use it. However, I've set it up as a goad, G-O-A-D. I take that to mean, Richard, that you use it as some kind of mentor, feedback to help you understand your work. For my writing, Richard says, it comes up with comments like, "This is not your best work." Oh, I showed it an image recently, and its comments to me were, "Well, this is a good start." But the next was, "You don't seem committed to this image." I had no idea. I don't know what one you're using, Richard. But I've always found AI to be a bit of a sycophant. Maybe not to DEFCON 1 level, but generally. But I'm intrigued. What AI are you using that it's giving you this kind of feedback? Well, it's honest, I suppose. Well, is it honest? It's subjective. The creative side, says Richard, is mine. I'll never cede this to AI. I use it to make me think. And this is where I have an issue with it. It shortcuts thinking, and we all lose a bit of ourselves every time we allow it to think for us. It may be that I am becoming less sharp because of it, but it allows me to have a teacher and critic by asking the right questions and in turn getting it to justify why. Anyway, have a great day. Regards, Richard. Richard, you may just have stumbled on the only healthy way to use AI as something that pushes back and has integrity. I didn't think that AI had it in it. It had it in it? That's terrible grammar. AI, just improve that sentence structure, would you? To give you that kind of feedback. I just assumed it told everybody that their work was brilliant. Apparently not.
I got a letter this morning, boy. Hey, hey, honey. I got a letter this morning, boy. Hey, hey, honey. I got a letter this morning. Gonna see you when the sun goes down.
It's the photo walk of a Friday. I was about to say me with my camera. Usually it's the X100, isn't it? But today it's the iPhone, making pictures of pools of light. I just made a few moments ago, actually. Haven't yet found my bluebells in the pool of light. They do seem to be on the other side of the fence. This project is looking ever more attractive, isn't it? Increasingly attractive. So the photo walk of a Friday, please, if you'd like to send in some thoughts, some letters, that's what drives this show, then send them to stories@photowalk.show, stories@photowalk.show. Without them, we don't have much of a show. Do we, pups? Eh? Do we? Oh, shoot, do you want some water? Come here, you're panting a bit, so let me give you some water. Hold on, I'm going to have to put the put my microphone down for this. Have some water. I'll pour it into my hand. I didn't bring your doggy bowl. There we go. There we go. Why have you got stuff all over your fur? What have you been rubbing yourself in? The assignments are back. We kicked off with one last week. They are now quarterly assignments. This then is April through June, inclusive. I'll tell you how you can take part in a moment.
The photo walk assignment.
Gail, a one-word assignment. Now, we've talked a lot about your art and your writing, and a bit about photography. And I wonder whether there's a word you can draw from this wonderful creative life you have.
Darkness.
Darkness. Now, I know from our conversation, darkness is very important for you. Perhaps you'd like to elaborate.
I would like if people could go outside one night after work, after dinner, in the garden, in the street, in the supermarket car park, just stop and look up, wait for the clouds to clear, and just look at what they can see, and just keep looking. Let their eyes adjust and just notice what's in that dark patch of sky. And I think people would be amazed. Satellites, stars, clouds, planets, everything. And it'll take time. Just let your eyes adjust. Just keep watching. And if you fancy, just take your phone out, put it onto a 3-second timer and just take a quick picture, and you'll be amazed what you'll capture.
I think darkness is a really interesting one. I'm going to extend it a little bit more, and I hope Gail won't mind, because yes, whilst looking up is fantastic, and I'm really hoping we get some phenomenal astro stuff. But darkness can be many things, can't it? So extend your creative thoughts around darkness. Good luck with it. All entries will go onto the assignments page on the website at photowalk.show. Look for the latest one set by Gail Hilliard, which is where you'll find the email address to send yours to and all the entry rules. The winner will receive a show flask, and you also have a chance to come onto the show if you wish to talk about your picture. Right. Concluding part of my chat today with the American portrait photographer Paul Mobley, and of course his why at the end. We could talk endlessly about your celebrity work, but I'm equally taken by work like American Farmer, Everyday Heroes, where you're documenting people whose lives aren't usually in the spotlight. What made you want to, if you pardon the pun, focus on those stories as much as the celebrities that you're equally known for?
Well, the Farmer book really was an accident. The Farmer book was a result of me doing too much regular commercial work and needing a break. So I had gotten to a point back in that time where I was on the verge of burnout because I was working quite a bit. And it's not the work, Neil, that tears you up. It's the demands, it's the deadlines, it's the constant pressure with 20 people looking over your back saying, no, don't do this, don't do that. The bigger the job, the higher the pressure, because the expectations are so much greater. You know, if you've been told you were selected from 20 big, very well-known photographers to do the job, there's that first layer of pressure, like, oh my gosh, now I have to. But the Farmer book and all of those projects after really started as me needing a break from the business world or the commercial photography. And I took a summer off and went up to, we have a cabin in northern Michigan outside of the city. And I was really planning on not taking any pictures at all for that summer. And I walked into a coffee shop. And I saw 4 farmers sitting at the coffee shop having breakfast, and they were all filthy, dirty. And of course, I looked over at them like, oh my gosh, I gotta photograph those guys. And my wife said to me, but wait, you weren't gonna take any pictures this summer. And I told her, I remember saying, but this is different because there's no deadlines here. There's no pressure. This is just me kind of going back to why I became a photographer, a guy with a camera. And I went up to those farmers and I very innocently asked them, guaranteed they'd never had their picture taken. This was a very small town. And I asked one of them if he wouldn't mind if I came over and take his picture. And he kind of laughed, and he made a comment to me that he hadn't taken a bath in a week. Why would I want to do that? And that ended up turning a summer of no photographs into me photographing every farmer in the county. And it really reinvented or reminded me of my love for photography and why I became a photographer. And talking with those guys and just hanging with them and, being part of that world was great. And then that turned into the heroes and then the centenarians and then, my latest book, The Firefighters. And it was just part of who I am, that I need to connect with real people because there's so much substance in what they have to say, and just being around them, the kindest, most decent people you'll ever meet.
And it's interesting because these are not necessarily projects that earn you a dime and a dollar.
Agreed. What they do is they feed your soul. They keep your photography muscle strong because you're still making pictures. Doesn't matter. Camera doesn't know who's in front of the lens. But I think that it has helped me not let the celebrity work drive me nuts. You know what I mean? Because that, if you get into that and you let it take you over, it will change you as a person. It'll change your values. It's just been a great balancer for me to be able to photograph a 115-year-old man and then walk in and photograph Dave Grohl of the Foo Fighters. It's good. It's been a great gift for me to be able to do both.
I can't remember whether it was what particular project it was. I think it might have been American Farmer, but I think one of your favourite pictures from this series is actually not a person. It's a tattered American flag.
Well, it's actually this image behind me.
And I was going to say, there it is behind you. I have the good fortune to be able to see that image. Of course, this is in audio, so we'll have to imagine it. I hopefully, perhaps I can put that on the show page.
Yeah, well, what happened was that it was the significance, Neil, of this was one of the last pictures I made in the book, and it was a farmer down in Louisiana. A big storm had come through his town and wiped his entire farm out. And I remember being there with him, photographing him, and him telling me how, on a Tuesday, the storm came through, and then Wednesday, everything was gone. His farm, his cattle, his machinery. And he's telling this story, and, he was being very methodical about it. I was almost in tears just listening to it. And then when I went to leave, I went into one of his outbuildings and I saw this flag hanging on the wall, all nailed up with little nails. And I ran out and asked him to come in, and I asked him what this was. And he told me that a couple of days before the storm, he ran out and bought a brand new flag. And the storm was so bad that when he got back, not only was his house gone, the flagpole was like an arrow through a tree, the actual pole, and the flag was gone. So he had spent weeks trying to, what he said, make sense of all of it, how he was going to start over. And he kept walking around his land. And every time, every once in a while, he'd look down and see a little piece of this tattered flag. And he, pick one up, he'd put it on the wall, and kind of as a reminder to him that this was his land, that he wasn't gonna. It was a real symbol of survival and perseverance, and kind of the greatest comeback in farming history, because every other farmer in that county that lost their farm quit or retired or moved out of state. He's the only one who stayed.
I suppose as I looked at the photographs that you made of, I wish there was a better term for this, normal people, the good folk of our countries that are the very lifeblood of the places we live, because they're all around us. I'm instantly thinking of the very tattooed former atheist guy who's now a priest at the biggest church in my town. These are fascinating characters. They're all around us, aren't they?
My favorite thing is to see them. I'm always looking I'm on vacation, I'm looking. I'm in Europe, I'm looking. I'm wherever I'm at, I'm always looking. And, I'm supposed to, in theory, it'd be great for me to say, oh, Neil, I always have a camera on me at all times. Well, I don't. I'm not that guy. I'm not a street photographer, but I always try to keep one in my car in case I happen to come across somebody like this. But certainly, yes, they're everywhere. And, I think photographers see the world in a little different way than others. And I'm always looking like that. I'll be at a farmer's market and I'll look and see somebody. And I'm really intrigued by what you just said, just the people we meet every day.
I call it the law of shoulda, woulda, coulda. It's a very hard law to master in life, particularly in the creative arts. And I've heard you say that with every shoot, there's a why didn't I get that moment? Why didn't I do this? Why didn't I think to shoot that? And it is the lay of the land or par for course in this business. But I'm still surprised that you're quite hard on yourself.
I think all photographers are kind of like that. We always walk away thinking, oh, why didn't I do, it happens every shoot. Even when I make a list, because a lot of times I will make a shot list and say, got to get this. If they're in a good mood, let's try for that. If they're really in a good mood, let's see if they'll stand on their head, right? And sometimes I'll walk away from that list and say, I got everything on the list. And then I'll go back and start looking at the images and saying, are you kidding me? All you needed to do was turn their head to the full side and you had the best profile. So it's always like that. Obviously, I want to come away with a good image, but I don't think there's ever a time where I've said, oh, I just nailed this. I think that's just being a photographer.
Well, in that case, then, who's the best or biggest or most important critic in your life? Is it your agent? Is it your publicist? Is it you? Is it your wife? You mentioned your wife.
She is a tough critic for sure. She's been in the business a long time. She started with me in the very beginning as a stylist in my studio. She's got a great eye. But at the end of the day, I think it's me because I'm the one who has to represent the work. I would say by far I'm the toughest critic.
I do want to come to some of the celebs that you have shot. I will come to that. But I did notice, and it immediately piqued my curiosity when looking through your website, how important travel is to you. And I've only really recently, in the last 5-6 years perhaps, found that travel is really important to me as a creative. That it opens up a world of opportunity, a possibility of learning about people, about learning about myself, learning about empathy, that just, I know not everybody can travel, so I'm always a bit cautious when I mention it. Something you should do, but it is a really important thing in your life, isn't it?
The most important. I've been so many places, and every place that I've been, whether it's the land, the city, the people, the climate, the air, has left a mark on me. And I think for me, travel really humbles me. You see how other people live and the happiness that they live, especially in places where they don't have a lot. So many times I walk away saying, you can't complain about anything. You're not allowed to do it. You just witnessed the most joy from this family living with nothing or with just enough. The happiness level is a 10 out of 10. You don't have to travel expensively. If somebody says, well, I can't afford to go there. I've been to so many places where people are backpacking or staying in hostels or, younger kids that don't have any money, but the life experience that it brings you to do that, I think is priceless.
Does it take courage? Do you think it takes a particular form of courage? I talk, for example, in my family, when I come home from places like Bangladesh, like Varanasi with the funeral pyres, which I've talked about a lot of late, which have evidently and clearly left a strong image in my mind in all kinds of ways. Does it take they'll say, oh, I could never do that. It takes an element of courage. Is that the right word, courage?
I think the willingness to be open and to think outside the box. And I'm not even talking as a photographer. To go to some of the places you and I have just spoke about and experience their way of life. Yeah, I do think courage is a good word. You add on stopping strangers and asking them to make their portrait. That adds another level of courage. I normally like to take somebody who lives there. My first plan of attack, I was in Vietnam and I found a very good English speaking person who knew what I wanted to do and went with me everywhere. So at least there was that bridge in between me and the subject. And that helps me a lot. But I just walk away at, the end of all of those days, I walk away thinking, gosh, what a great group of people, or what a great city that doesn't get any credit. It's a good thing, I think, for us to do that.
Well, I've often called it this box that we carry. It's essentially a passport to curiosity, isn't it? I always look at the camera as just kind of I call it my recorder. A lot of guys get very excited about equipment, and I've had every camera you can have, trust me. But when you really boil it down, that camera is just to kind of lock in that whole experience that you and I have been talking about. After all these years of photographing other people, do you think you understand people any better? Have you become an expert of life?
Maybe a little better. I'm always surprised. To me, I'm always trying to crack the difficult ones, as you know what I mean. Whether they're famous or not, if they're quiet, if they're troubled, I'm always trying to get to the bottom of it. Meaning that, how can I get past that wall? My father was a great conversationalist and he loved people. And I think I'm very lucky to have gotten that from him. I'm always trying to converse no matter where I'm at. I like to see people happy. And I think when you, especially strangers, start to crack a nice conversation, it's good. I guess it's a work in progress, Neil, that I'll always, continue to try to not only find the next great face, but to really try to see people in their way and how they see the world.
I do have, I'm going to finish with a regular question that I have in a moment, but I do have, and I hope you won't mind me picking two particular names that I fear you've probably answered questions about lots and lots of times, but I'm going to ask them anyway because it's new to me. Ringo Starr is your favourite, I believe, if he is still your favourite, of course. And I wonder why. I mean, we mentioned Paul McCartney in our conversation already, so Ringo Starr seems an apposite time to mention him. But why is he your favourite? Well, what did he do?
I was a Beatles fan. I wasn't a huge Beatles fan, but I think with Ringo, obviously there were the gatekeepers and there was a lot of planning to get to that moment. And in my mind, I had in my mind what I thought that shoot was going to go like. Here's one of the most famous people in the world. It's probably going to go quick. He's probably going to give me a few different things. And it was exactly the opposite. He came into the room, treated me like a brother, could not have been more complimentary, giving, friendly. The fact that he likes to take pictures was a great kind of conversation starter. We talked a lot about old Beatles photographs that Harry Benson did and some of the things that he could really tell me about. So I almost turned it into him telling me about photography and why he liked to take pictures the way he did. But I want to start by saying there was a 15-minute time cap or 20 minutes on that shoot. And at the 20-minute mark, we were right in the heart of it. And I knew, because here comes one of the gatekeepers, my alarm kind of goes off and I said, Ringo, I was told I could only have 20 minutes and we're at 20 minutes. And he looked at the gatekeeper. He said, no, you go ahead. We're going to keep going. And he gave me another 25 minutes. So I had almost 45 minutes with him. And we kind of finished shooting and started talking about an old film camera, a Pentax 6x7 that I happened to bring because I thought it might be another conversation starter. When we left, I thanked him up and down and he said, oh, I really wanted to do this because I love your work. And at that point, that's what really stuck with me. He left the room. And since then, I visited with him a few times to show him the work and just say hi. But for a short minute there after he left, I was just sitting in that room by myself, and I kind of put my head down and thought, it took me right back to the first day I got a camera, Neil. And I thought, man, this has been a great day. It really brought my whole career full circle when he said that. So I think it was just more of his basic human kindness, especially at his level, to be able to not only be so gracious, but to compliment me in that way. It's the last thing I expected.
On the flip side, I know that the conversation and the shoot with Mike Tyson, wasn't quite what you expected. I think you went in with some pretty strong ideas, and he wasn't sure, was he?
Not at all. He was not in a great mood that day, but I noticed in his backyard he had a giant cage full of pigeons. And I've read countless stories about his relationship and these birds. He didn't really want to be there between you and I. But when I said to him, I said, Mike, how do you feel about me making a picture with you and one of your pigeons? And it completely turned it upside down. He goes, oh, that'd be great. And he walked into this cage full of pigeons and just swooped one up as fast as you could imagine and brought it out. And it changed the whole dynamic of what it was. And he started to tell me that these pigeons for him are very meditative, and they help him just relax and find the beauty in life. And it was just great.
Well, the sound of a wood pigeon for me is probably the most meditative sound, I think, if you can imagine it.
Yeah. So sometimes I talk about the photography gods, and the photography gods smile down on me today. And sometimes you can have all the training in the world, you can do all the research, you can have the best cameras, but sometimes you just need a little twist of fate and you got a great picture.
That's a lovely story, and certainly proof that knowing who you're going to photograph is really important. Knowing more about them than just what they've done in their career. Paul, that's a final question I ask for all my guests. What's your why?
I think it's the pursuit of not only the next great face, but the adrenaline rush that I get from the start, the preparation, the shoot itself, and then the aftermath is, it just brings me so much joy. And to be able to create, a lot of times I look at these pictures in my office and I think, these are just a moment in time. They're a brief moment in time between really two strangers who had never met before, and this is what happened. Because in so many of these cases, Neil, I'm never going to see these subjects again. So it's a meeting of two strangers, and what happens within that little window of 15 minutes, 30 minutes of two people, and what did I record? What did I document? What did I remember? It's just too good to let go. I've spoke about Irving Penn, who's to me the reason I became a photographer, and he made photographs until the day he died. And I kind of feel like there's no finish line for me. I am always going to have that curiosity to see if I can make another good picture. And how about another one? And what if I go here? What if I do that? So it's been a great career, certainly full of challenges, but the joy was worth the struggle for me.
Well, that should be the finish line, really, for this conversation. But in the spirit of the greatest American TV detective who I love and grew up watching, Columbo, just one more thing. I'm going to talk to you about I'll just mention my one of my favorite, perhaps the favorite American musician, Billy Joel, and it sort of steers us back to piano playing. And I know that if I were a pianist, if I were a piano player, I think the song I would like to start up my new career with on stage would be Piano Man. It's one of the most incredible songs I think ever written. Go on, take yourself back to if you hadn't been a photographer, you'd have played piano. What would be your opening big number?
It's funny because you mentioned Billy Joel, and Billy Joel was kind of one of my heroes back then because he was a rock star piano player. So was Elton, right? So those were my two I would play that music. Those were the guys that I played the most. And I think of all of Billy's songs, and one of my favorites is Vienna. And even today when I hear it, it kind of feels a little bit like, not the soundtrack of my life, but just the tempo of that song, the words, the meaning has kind of really how I feel about my own life. Places I've been, things I see, things that I haven't seen, things I wished I would have seen, and just the joy of life.
And my sincere thanks this week to Paul Mobley for being my guest. He'll actually be back on the Extra Mile today, sharing some thoughts, just a few thoughts. It's only a 3-4 minute piece alongside the other interview I have with Gary Waits, who is an extra miler, who's going to be talking more about landscapes and sketching, funnily enough, not sketchbook photos, but actual sketching and the other arts that we involve ourselves in as creatives. So that's on the Extra Mile this week. Last letter of the week time in a moment. Some thank yous to our wonderful team: Neil Ford, Andrea Gilpin, Kelly Mitchell, Kelvin Brown and Michael Brennan, who keep us all in order here. Help the wheels. The wheels, that's wrong. The wheels keep turning, or the footsteps keep stepping. Yeah, I think I'm getting terribly muddled here, aren't you? You're quite right, pups. Do you want me to throw that stick for you? Before we do last letter of the day, last stick throw of the day. Oh, God, this is a big old stick. No, you're supposed to let me throw it. The point is to throw it, pups. No. Listen, I can't introduce the last letter of the show. Let go. Here we go. Ready? Go!
It's the last letter of the show. The last letter of the show.
So yes, here is the last letter of the show. Raja Bhagavatula, our friend Raj. Hi Neil, I loved the Bangladesh episode. I'm eagerly waiting to listen to the India episode. Yes, so since the letter, both are now out. Bangladesh is episode 524, and I almost said 624. 100 episodes slipped by for no reason, and India is 526. Anyway, Raj came on the Scotland Photo Workshop, and one of the places we visit each year, or I'm not sure we're going to it this year, but we have been visiting is Cromarty, the most incredible place, because you get the history of the oldest trading town in Scotland, with oil rigs being serviced just off the bay. You have to see it, really. To believe it. Anyway, as Raj says, I've finally settled on a series of 5 pictures from our Cromarty walk. It's taken a couple of years, Raj. I've attached pictures, and I'm going to call this Coexistence Cromarty. I even have an artist statement. An artist statement? That sounds very grown up. These photographs were made in Cromarty, a quiet coastal town in the Scottish Highlands, where traces of the oil industry sit alongside everyday life. Disused oil rigs linger offshore, boats rest in and out of the water, and people gather to look out across the bay. Rather than presenting these elements as in conflict, this series I've made observes how they coexist. Industrial structures recede into the background of leisure, becoming part of the visual and emotional landscape. Human and animal presence appears quietly through waiting, looking, and being absent. These moments sit alongside structures built for extraction and permanence. Meaning emerges through proximity between people, infrastructure, and stillness. By moving between these registers, the photographs reflect a landscape shaped as much by what's overlooked as by what remains. These pictures, says Raj, were made in a place that has learned to hold contradiction without resolution. Hope you enjoy them as much as I did capturing them, and thank you for showing me this beautiful little town. I tell you what, the Highlands does that to you, doesn't it? Delivers you to fantastical places. All the best, Raja, or Raj. First up, great images. They really are. They really, really are. And they will be, as I say, on the show page. And you can sneak a glimpse at more places we'll be going to in Scotland this year on the website. Second up, lovely to hear from you. Thank you so much for your words and for your pictures. It's a privilege to have them on the page. And, well, that's it for this week. I'm going to make a final, because I've arrived at a place where I can certainly make a final sketchbook photograph on my iPhone. I'm doing pools of light today. I decided to use the iPhone just because I wanted to. So often I take it out on walks and I use it as my main camera. I don't always take my X100 with me. So here we go. Some ferns here. I always, what I do is I pull down the exposure. So I focus, then pull the exposure right down. There we go. Sometimes it, unfortunately, manages to launch another app, but here we go. Fabulous. Something Mally said to me that's very true, very pertinent, is when he's out photographing with a phone, which he does as well, but I know not very regularly. If he uses his phone, he often has it on airplane mode, so that it's not binging and bonging and throwing notifications at him. So, tip from the top, as it were. If you like what you hear, but you'd like to hear some more, then The Extra Mile is now out. It's available through our website, photowalk.show, for those who haven't joined The Extra Mile yet. That'll tell you how to become an extra miler, and then you can listen through your app as well, your favourite podcast app. For those who shoot Fujifilm, this coming Monday, there's my twice monthly dalliance with that Mullins bloke. And then Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays are now publishing personal thoughts. It's a step within and sometimes out of photography. Last week, or this week, the week just gone, for example, I was talking about the Cray twins and a strange association. Association's probably too strong with the Crays, the notorious Crays. So that's wherever you get your podcasts, look up Halfway to Maybe, or you can go to halfwaytomaybe.co.uk. 2 being T-O. Right, the play-out song is from Flint. It's called Hey. And with all the drifting through the pools of light today, I think this one is perfect. But we need a PS, don't we? So while you think about what's been said during this play-out song on the show today, some words from Darby Hudson, my newest found gem, thanks to my good friend Phil. Darby says, I rarely check my bank balance. Instant anxiety attack. I never have enough, I think, as I open my wallet full of nothing but leaves and pebbles to pay for watching the moon.
Hey, I found a way, 'cause I can see our feet out, drifting away, making, despite our aching legs. 'Cause I know that you're here, and here you will stay. Now I am low as I can lie, and I stay down the ditch if you're not getting out. I can stay down. If you're not getting out. I found a way. I know that you are here, and here you will stay. I know that you are here, and here you will stay. 'Cause I know that you are here.
The Photo Walk is a Loading Zone production.